Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Moving on to presentations, proclamations, and visitors. Is there anyone online signed up? Nope. Nope. And we have one person signed up to speak. Go ahead and come.
Good evening. I'm Deanna Cox, 126 Carmel Drive, and I help with the Cornfest Princesses. And this year, the girls had no help from me decorating the float. This was their idea. They did the decorations, and I want to present to the city. They won the Grand Theme Award.
Awesome. You want it up at the office or?
It's a city thing, so I just do it while I feel.
Pass this down to staff. I'm gonna put flowers in it. We'll put fake flowers in it.
Sitting in the mayor's office.
Next to the corn statues. If you guys haven't been in the office, guys, there's a lot of weird corn stuff I've been getting. All right, moving on. Thank you, Deanna. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The consent agenda is approved. Moving on to public hearings. The council will now open the public hearing on ordinance 725, amending ordinance 705, the Aumsville development ordinance at 7:03 p.m. We will invite Ron to present the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor Council. Ron Harding, City Administrator. So this action before you tonight is ordinance 725, as the mayor just said. I'll start by just talking about the criteria to complete a development ordinance update. There's a process in our ordinance in 705 that outlines how an action will come before the council. This particular action was initiated by the council. Staff took the comments from a work session of the council where we reviewed some of the development standards and made some suggested edits. On the first thing we had to do was notice DLCD. We have to provide them a 35-day notice, and we provided that notice back on July 23rd. Then we would convene the first public hearing, which would be in front of the Planning Commission, more than 35 days past that notice, which was September 5th. And this went before the Planning Commission last Thursday. And they have a recommendation, which I will get to. They recommended approval of the suggested changes with one minor exception. And that was to remove the duplexes out of the outright permitted use in section 5.01. As you know, House Bill, I believe it's House Bill 3395, basically said the cities have to allow duplexes in all single family zones. We have until 2025 to implement that. we just included it as part of this update since we were doing the other revisions. The Planning Commission felt that we needed to understand better some of the impacts of Senate Bill 1537 before we actually made that particular change. And so they asked if we would wait, and they do have a plan per your directions to do some work sessions related to design standards. And so for now, we follow that criteria in 15. 15.02 is the findings that the council actually initiated this particular action. So this comes before you after the Planning Commission. There's also criteria to make sure that the amendments do not conflict with our comprehensive plans. Our findings are that these are consistent with our comprehensive plans. There's a requirement that they are consistent with the goals within the comprehensive plan. And I've cited 2 goals here in the staff report under my findings. The residential goal to provide housing needs for existing and future residents of Aumsville to ensure that the residential areas are pleasant, healthy, and safe places in which to live. So those are fairly high-level goals, and I believe that these changes fit within those goals. Some of the other criteria would be that the amendment would not be detrimental to the general interest of the city. And I find that the amendments are actually consistent with the general interest of the city. So I'm not going to go through each of those criteria, but what I will do is I will go ahead and go through the amendments that are outlined in your packet. So the first one, 15.01, we're going to omit duplexes. We're going to take that out per the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Or sorry, 5.01. Yes, thank you, Mayor.
So if you take it out, then it just goes back under multifamily?
It's just not in the single family zone for now. It does have to be there by June of 2025, but by then we're going to have to do a larger revision. And I think the discussion of the Planning Commission was we should wait for that larger revision for that particular change. And for us, we were just trying to meet that notification deadline. So we put it in there knowing that it had to be changed before 2025, but we're going to have at least one more revision prior to that, possibly 2. So we're going to have a busy fall.
This ordinance is going to be coming back to the council.
This will be coming back to the council, yes. If you go to section 510, one of the things we discussed with council is really it's the design standards that we want to try to make sure that we're communicating well to new development. And so the change that we put here is we didn't really add any design standards. There's 11 under 510D. But the common design standards that we want to see in developments are 4, 8, and 11. And so the change that we said is that, a developer must pick 4, 8, and 11. And then they can pick 3 of the other following design standards. So that just ensures is that we have that basic design element for new home construction or, duplexes or apartments or whatever. We carried that same language for consistency over to 610 design standards. So those are exactly the same. So for consistency, either in single family or multifamily zones. And then the remainder of the edits were really the ones council directed us to do in section 28, which was the master plan development. And what we've done is we've attempted to modify the master plan development. As this was written, the language was a bit ambiguous, and the area that really concerned the council during our discussion was 28.06 modification of standards. And what council wanted to make sure that we conveyed is in order to utilize a modification of our design standards, one is it's limited. It's not just replace the development standards with whatever you want it to do. So we sought to limit it here. Now, council can accept these edits. You can modify these edits. You can remove section 28 altogether. We just went with the revision approach. So under our approach, we started with 28.01, where the previous language said to provide the means for phased master plan and large development sites while encouraging innovative planning that benefits the community. Well, when I see that, I think large development sites. Well, if you go to the next 28.02, it described a development parcel as 2 acres or more. And our discussion was 2 acres is not a large development. Basically, every development met the criteria. So the purpose really was in contradiction to the text. And so what we did was we said any modifications, we added 28.01, any modifications to the development standards must be consistent with the purpose of the underlying zone. So one is it's not an open book. You can't just use development standards for any zone. You have to modify the development standards of that zone. So we didn't want to communicate to a developer that they could take the smallest lot size and apply it to a different zone and then modify it even more, right? So we added that. We changed the 2 acres to 20 acres in 28.02. And then the next big revision is the modification 28.06. And in there, we basically said our intent is not to override or replace the development standards in the underlying zone, but allow for a minimum adjustment of one or more of the standards. And we described that as 10% or less. We had to give it a quantifiable number. What does minimum standards mean? You have the authority to say it's less than 10%. We, as staff, had to put a number in there. And so you could also modify that if you wanted to convey that that standard is actually less than 10%. You're welcome to do that. But that's what we put in there. And then there was a little bit of an error we found in the next section, which is A and B. And this is the qualifiers to be able to modify the standards. And in the old language, at the top, it described in order to modify, you had to meet one of both of these standards. But somewhere along the lines, the word or got in there. So it was you would meet standard A or you would meet standard B. And what our intent was that you had to meet both standards A and standards B. So we changed that or to an and. So these are simple wordsmithing edits for the most part, but they do convey a different message to the developer. So what we said was you must meet standard A, and you must meet 2 or more of the standards in B. So they basically have to meet 3 standards to do a modification. They have to be 20 acres or more to do a modification, and the modifications are now limited to a 10% diversion of whatever the standard might be. Now that when we talk about standards, we're talking about things like a lot size or things like that. We're not going to modify, a sidewalk standard or street standard or things like those. That wouldn't be in the public's interest, and it probably wouldn't meet ADA. And so one of the other changes that we made in this modification section was we defined what affordable housing is. And what we did was we used the state's ORS to describe what qualifies for affordable housing. And the reason why we did that is because affordable means something different to everybody. I could say I was gonna sell my homes for 700,000, but if I get this exemption, I'm gonna sell them for 690. And so now it's more affordable than the 700. Well, that's a pretty low threshold to me. So if you're gonna say that you're providing a benefit to the community by building affordable homes, there should be some criteria that you have to meet. So we put criteria in here. It's not just, I would have sold it for one, but now I'm selling it for another. It's, you need some definition that the state said qualifies for affordable housing. And then the final revision, there's a few edits that are just wordsmithing. The final revision was in 28.09, and that's the final review plan. So if somebody's coming in with a master plan application, typically they don't have everything, they don't have all the details worked out. They're coming in to get an approval, then they're going to go back and work on further refining the details. So they come in with what's called a conceptual plan. They get their land use approval, and then they come back for their final plan review. Well, in the old version under 28.09B, they would submit their packet, their information to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission would make a determination if their packet was complete. Well, under Oregon state law, that really has to be done at the administrative level because we have 30 days to determine if an application is complete and to communicate to the applicant what needs to be provided to make that application complete. And so you can't really do that if the Planning Commission's making that determination. So that was when we did our legal review, city attorney pulled that out and said, I think that it could cause the city some implementation problems. But the second issue is you're going to run afoul to state ORS. And I think it's 227. I have it in my staff report. ORS 227 178. And so he asked that we had changed that is basically the administrative authority. It might be me, it might be the planner that we assign to it, but they'll look at the application and make sure it's complete. So I think we accomplished what council discussed. However, you do have some flexibility if you want to, through deliberations or questions and answers, talk about what other things might look like. But your two main changes to the ordinance as they sit before you tonight is implementing some basic design standards as must in the design standards. And then the modification to section 28, which basically says any modification that's used under this, number one, has to meet the defined criteria, which is now more detailed. And number two is limited. It's not just you get a free rewrite of the development ordinance. It's limited to specific things. And so I think this is a good stopgap. Obviously, we talked to council about reviewing the design standards to be more specific, and that's going to take more time and more work. And then in my report, we're going to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 1537 and some of the changes and how that might impact our thought pattern on how we balance the need for affordable housing with the desire to meet our vision and maintain, the livability that we want to try to maintain and establish here in the city. If you have any questions, I think I gave you just a quick overview, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time. Or you could go through the process and come back to me. It's really up to you.
Is there anyone that has any questions? There's nobody signed up to speak on this.
Anybody like to speak?
I have no questions. This is all things that we have been discussing. So if there are no questions and no deliberation, I will now close the public hearing. at 7:20 PM and move on to council deliberations, but is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move to approve the first reading of title only for ordinance 725. An ordinance amending ordinance 705, the Aumsville Development Ordinance, including provisions to further outline residential design standards and amend standards and procedures for master planning developments as presented by staff.
Could you just include in that motion as recommended by the planning commission?
As recommended by staff and the planning commission?
Yeah. Was it in there?
Yeah.
Okay,
No.
that would be great.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. May I have a motion for the second reading? So do we need a motion for the second reading?
Anybody can make the second reading. Yeah.
Again?
Yep.
I move to approve the second reading by title only and adopt ordinance 725, an ordinance amending ordinance 705, the Aumsville Development Ordinance, including provisions to further outline residential design standards and amend standards and procedures for master plan developments as presented by staff and the planning commission. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
I just wanted you to add that little bit because they did modify their recommendation.
It's not in there. I thought it was.
Yeah, and
reading
that was perfect what you did there. Thank you.
So the council will now open a public hearing on ordinance 726, adopting public contracting regulations and repealing ordinance 677 at 7:22 PM. We'll have Ron present the staff report.
So this is, again, Ron Harding, City Administrator for the City of Aumsville. Again, this was something that was initiated by council several months ago. It took a while to do the rewrites. Last year, there was a Senate Bill 1047, which changed some of the contracting rules. Our previous ordinance had some of the old language embedded in it, so it wasn't really consistent with some of the new contracting rules. And our ordinance directed us to the state ORS, and now the state ORS has changed. So we needed to go through and do some modifications to the language in the contracting ordinance. We did a complete rewrite because we had a new city attorney from BEH that looked at this. That's a contracting, I'll say an expert because they know a heck of a lot more about it than I do. And rewrote this, and their spin was just a little bit different than our previous version. And it just seemed like it was better to do a repeal and replace with a new ordinance than to go through all the edits from the old one. Although we did leave the edit version, I believe is in your packet as well. But basically, other than qualifying for state language, the effect of this ordinance is one, we outline that this is consistent with the chapter 137 Oregon statute. We remove the definitions from the models rules because some of the definitions are changing over time. And they're really, we can look under state statute for definitions as they are amended. And so the recommendation was just to take those out. There are some definitions embedded within the ordinance where they need to be, but we don't have kind of this menu of definitions that we really don't need. There is an increased spending authority. One of the reasons why the legislature adopted this bill was because things cost more. And the old spending limits is really hard to be able to function under the older thresholds. So I'll just kind of go through those. One is increase the soliciting agent spending authority from $50,000 to $100,000. I am the soliciting agent for the city. And previously my threshold was 50,000, so it increases it to 100. Although as council knows, my policy is generally, unless there's an emergency, to bring those things forward to council for approval. I mean, I bring $10,000 contracts forward for approval. If there's no urgency in what we're doing, I typically do that regardless, just as a matter of transparency policies. But that does increase that. It increases the spending authority for personal service contracts from 150 to 250 before a formal bidding process is triggered. So there's 3 stages of awarding a contract in the city. One is a direct award, and there's a threshold in there for the soliciting agent to just submit a direct award. And that's because typically we do that with personal service contracts where we have a professional consultant or something like that. And even though we do what's called a direct award, that doesn't mean it won't come to council. That just means we don't have to go through a larger public bidding process. The second stage is what we call an informal bid process. And that's where we go out and we solicit bids ourselves. We don't have a big RFP where it's got all of these criteria and proposals and scoring that gets advertised statewide for a period of time, and we have an official closing and we open the bids. That's the official RFP bid process. But the informal process is we go out, we know we have 3 contractors that typically work in this area that, you know, replace X, you know, something for the city, sidewalk or road repair, whatever. And we get a bid from at least three people. And then we just go with the lowest bid, and then we do what's called a direct award. That's an informal bid process. They've increased the threshold for those because, again, you know, it used to be $10,000. You could do an ADA ramp for 6,800 or 6,000 or something like that. Now they're 25,000. So you really can't do a whole lot and stay within that informal bid process. But for personal service contracts, that threshold did increase quite a bit from 150 to 250, where you can go out and say, this person's qualified, that person's qualified, give me some costs and we'll get some work done. And then there's a process for sole sourcing items. There's some items where there's only one person. It's like a few years ago, we had to change our jack screw or screw screen. Yeah, that was a sole source. It was like a proprietary thing made by one manufacturer, and we literally would have to replace the entire thing if we didn't sole source it. So it was a lot cheaper to do that. And so that's why we did that. Public works projects, these are construction projects. And so as long as they're $100,000 or less, we don't have to go out and do a formal bidding process. Now, I want to qualify that by saying our estimates are $100,000 or less. Sometimes the bids can come in more than that and they still meet the criteria under the law. But again, in these days, everything's costing more. Increase small procurements from 10,000 to 25,000. These are small public works contracts, and 5,000 to 25,000 for the that's for the small public works contracts. So the small procurements are things that we purchase. So copy machines, $12,000. It would not have qualified at the $10,000 threshold. So when we bought our copy machine, I think we had to go and get it off the state contract or something like that in order to qualify. So there's other ways around it. And then intermediate public works projects of 100,000 or less, those follow that informal versus the RFP. Now, if we have large projects like the 3rd Street project was a $420,000 project, our engineering estimate on that was $390,000. we had to go through a full-blown RFP process, and that takes a few months. A lot of our capital projects, the water, the sewer projects, those are multi-million-dollar projects, and those all have to go through that formal RFP process. This is an ordinance before you tonight. If you want to approve it, it does require 2 readings. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I think I might have answered my own question, but just to make sure, so all these big projects still are in the budget. I mean, they're still approved through the budget process. They're all still,
Yeah,
it's
this
not
is,
like any of them are a surprise to us anyways, because we've already seen them in the budget process and.
yeah, this just basically outlines the process we use to go out and fulfill those projects, just to make sure that we're meeting all the state requirements for public contracting. And, it's kind of a mixed bag. The whole idea behind these rules were to make things so that they ensured that we were getting the lowest bids or the lowest qualified bids. I'm not sure that works in reality, but these are the hoops that we have to jump through. So.
I think you answered my question also when I was looking at the amounts. That's really a lot, but it's really not a lot. So,
Yeah, the dollars have really, the cost of things have really escalated since COVID. And it's not that people have just inflated things, cost of materials, cost of labor, all the things you need to produce something has really increased. Well, we feel the effects of that. And so, we see that at the end of the day when we purchase goods and services or initiate projects for residents. It's not, you used to be able to stretch $1. It's pretty hard to do it these days. So. And again, this doesn't mean this stuff won't land before the council for approval. But what it does do is it oftentimes makes it quicker for us to bring things forward to council for approval.
So if there are no further questions or public comments, I will now close the public hearing at 7:33 PM. Are there any deliberations from council? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the first reading by title only of ordinance 726, adopting rules to be known as the City of Aumsville Public Contracting Regulations and repealing ordinance number 677 as presented by staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. May I have a motion for the second reading?
Move to approve the second reading by title only and adopt ordinance 726, adopting rules to be known as the City of Aumsville Public Contracting Regulations and repealing ordinance number 677 as presented by staff.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to old business. There is no old business. New business. Okay, we have West Tech Design Final Contract Amendments. I'll now invite Matt to provide the report or information.
Good evening, Matt Etzel, Assistant Public Works Director. So we have an amendment to the final design contract with West Tech for the wastewater treatment plant improvements. The reason for the amendment is when we started the design contract, we weren't sure of funding sources. We've secured some funding sources and found that some of those funding sources have additional requirements. So the DEQ funding requires that we get basically a second opinion by another engineering firm. We've picked, with the help of West Tech, we've picked a company that specializes in SBRs. So we think this is good for the city, good for the community, because they're going to look at the project with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do in order to meet the permit requirements that DEQ's given us. They're also gonna look and see if there's anything that we're overdoing and that we can take out of the project if that's needed. So that was the first one. The second one is, with some federal funding from USDA. They categorize treatment plants as critical facilities, which it is a critical facility for our community, but the requirements for a critical facility through federal definition require additional seismic loading and standards. And talking with West Tech, they think that we can save a lot of money by doing a seismic analysis on the ground where we're going to build the plant, and be able to just to come back to USDA and say, this, we've proven that we don't need these seismic additions to the project, and they'll waive those standards with this report. So those are the two additions that you'll see. Kind of mentioned in the report as well that, you know, as we receive funding, as we get a little bit further on, there may be some more amendments like this. These were just things that we just weren't sure about. And for a $20 million project, these are things that are, you know, coming up that we need to take care of. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from staff? I don't have any questions. Is there a motion for the proposed amendment?
I move to approve the Aumsville wastewater treatment plant engineering contract amendment in the amount of $96,475,000 as presented by staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved unanimously. Moving on to 6B, Sixth Street improvement bid approval. Matt?
Yeah, so as you'll see across the street, there's been some improvements to one of the buildings. We had a local business contact us about wanting to improve some parking on their property as well. And you know, as a part of a vision for that area, we thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and try to do some pedestrian and sidewalk improvements, just, you know, partnering with that business owner to make those improvements. We directed our city engineer to drop some plans using the neighboring properties estimates. We used an informal bid process, and we reached out to several contractors and got quotes. It was a little bit more than we were anticipating, but we think there's some challenges with the project, as like trying to keep the business open and allow them still to be in business, where you could, you know, look at another project and be like, could try to compare prices where it's not really comparable. There's, you know, we're gonna have to keep part of the business open while we're doing those improvements. So that may require like a short load of concrete, which is gonna cost more, and you're not getting as much concrete. There's a lot of sequencing issues that have increased the price of the project. We are gonna try to take funds from money from several places for this project. We have $30,000 of ODOT pedestrian money that needs to be spent in the coming years, like relatively soon. We think this is a good use of those funds. It's gonna increase pedestrian connectivity through the downtown area. And then we'll have some funds that are matched by the business owner, who was gonna use those funds anyways to do the parking improvements. Yeah, if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer those. The drawings were included in the council report, and then you'll see the 3 proposals. We had one contractor that didn't want to give a proposal that we reached out to, said they wouldn't be able to meet the deadlines or didn't feel comfortable doing the project. And we received 2 other quotes besides that, and those were included.
And I just wanted to add, so council authorized us to initiate this project and go out for bid. At the time, we told you we thought our cost would be around 100,000. our cost is gonna be closer to about 150,000. A lot of that cost, like Matt said, was really about staging so the business could remain open. We didn't think about that. We were just looking at hard costs. If you don't want to move forward with the project, that's strictly up to you. We're just bringing it back to say, here's where we are. We could go out and do a formal bid process now that the bids are in later on in the year. We've talked about that with the sequencing. We don't think we're going to trim any cost, but we're happy to take that step if that's something you don't want to do. We do have plenty, I shouldn't say that. We have funds to pay for the project in both the street funds and our pedestrian line items.
And like Ron said, we could go out and receive additional quotes. What we would have to do is move to a public bidding process where we advertise it and then we score the bids. We have a bid opening. There'd be a little bit of additional cost to our engineer to do that because they would have to advertise it. They run the bid tabulations and that sort of thing and check those things. I think West Tech said around $5,000 to $6,000 to do that additional to put it out to public bid. So there is that, but we're not, one other thing that we were thinking maybe affected the price is, putting it out this time of year, but we're giving the contractors until the end of the fiscal year to complete the project. So if they have some downtime, we could get some better weather in the winter, we may be able to get this project in. If not, we'll get it in the spring before the end of the fiscal year. So by putting out for public bid, it's still gonna give them till the end of the fiscal year. So it's not really changing the time requirements on the project as well.
A question, but I mean, I totally support it as it is, and I think it's great that the city's, partnering with local businesses and.
Yeah.
Done. I mean, it's gonna make our.
Yeah.
Second.
Did I make a motion, Doug?
If you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready for a motion.
So I move to approve the proposed Canyon Contracting LLC in the amount of $186,134 for the 6th Street Improvement Project as presented by staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to 6C. Employee handbook updates. Ron will provide the report.
All right, Ron Harding, City Administrator. Thank you, Mayor Council. This is a project we've been working on throughout the year. There was a number of legislative changes. We're always making changes because of legislative changes. But specifically, the Paid Leave Oregon was adopted, I think, in 2023. And it had went through some administrative rulemaking, and we had to wait until that administrative rulemaking was complete before we could rewrite our employee handbook to make sure we were meeting the law. And so I'll go through some of the changes. We typically, when we do an employee handbook update, we try to follow the CIS's model handbook rule. There's a team of attorneys that deal with risk for the city, and they will typically go through and write language that's as protective as possible. And then we tend to insert our benefits and policy statements related specifically to the city, but not necessarily to the law. It was kind of a complicated rewrite for us to do because, as you can imagine, there's 282 cities in Oregon, I believe, of different sizes, and they all have different qualifiers. Some depending on the size of your city or the number of employees that you have, you're required to provide different levels of benefits. And so the handbooks are all inclusive, and you have to kind of go pick sections out of this very large document that pertain to your city. But I'll just kind of go through and highlight some of the main changes. One is that our city is still small, and we don't we don't trigger FMLA or OFLA because of the size of number of employees that we have. However, Paid Leave Oregon brings in and references OFLA and FEMLA in through a lot of the state rulemaking because they're not thinking that there's a lot of different cities. So the language can get a little confusing, but we did do the rewrite. We did run it by CIS for review, for legal review, and they provided that. One of the things that we just wanted to make sure we memorialized, we changed employee-related expenses and reimbursements, just the language a little bit to tie that to the GSA rate. Before we had some language that was use the conference rate or the lowest rate. And so we want you to use the lowest rate available. If the lowest rate is the conference rate, use the conference rate when traveling. If the lowest rate is a GSA rate and you can get accommodations for that, that's fine. It's whatever's practical. And then sick leave benefits. This was part of the new rewrite for Paid Leave Oregon. And basically what it says is you must provide 1 hour of unpaid sick leave each month for 30 hours worked. So for every 30 hours worked, you must provide 1 hour of unpaid sick leave. Well, we provide 2 hours of paid sick leave for 40 hours work. So we already meet that threshold. But we had to memorialize that language because that's the law. So we did, but in our employee handbook, we do meet that threshold. Some of the definitions have been changed related to qualified dependents. And those definitions are different depending on each section of benefits within the book. So this can get very complicated. So for Paid Leave Oregon, the benefits are very generic. If you remember, a few years ago, Oregon adopted a law that said domestic partnerships, if registered, qualify for benefits, and we should memorialize that. And they had domestic partners go and register to be domestic partners. This year, they added a qualification. That's still there, by the way. But this year, they basically added a qualification that said anybody that is a close relationship to you that is family-like. And you don't need to do anything. That's just a qualified dependent. So it's getting, I mean, to me, that encompasses just about anybody. Now, of course, you do have to go through Paid Leave Oregon, apply through the state, and they have to approve it, but it's fairly wide open. Now, some of our other benefits that we provide, we don't have to do quite at that open level. Like, you know, I've got a friend, he's just like an uncle to me, and I need to take care of him. You know, that would be, to me, that meets that standard under Paid Leave Oregon. So we did change those definitions per CIS's recommendations. Now, Paid Leave Oregon rules allow 12 to 14 weeks of leave each year. And they apply directly to the state for those benefits. And that's in addition to any benefit leave that we may provide. It's also important to note that they can collect these simultaneously. So you could have somebody who's on sick leave for the city, they can also apply for PLO benefits through the state. Now, the PLO benefits we pay into, they don't pay at a full rate. The only qualifier we put in the handbook is if you're gonna collect under PLO, you do have to fill out a form and file it with the city, so we know that you're collecting those benefits. Military leave, actually, there's a law that changed that. We used to provide 15 days of military-related leave that's paid for in addition to all the other leave. Now that's 21 days. And it could be for anything related to deployment. So that's taken some of that, trying to decide, did they qualify, didn't they qualify, out of the equation. And it's just simply, if they say they're gone on military related stuff, we pay for 21 days. One of the new things changing the times is artificial intelligence that's occurring in the city. So we wrote a section in there about utilizing AI in the workplace. We probably utilize it a little bit in the workplace to get ideas and stuff, but we don't have AI write our reports or create programs or laws or anything like that. But we could see where that could be a thing that could occur. And we don't want that. We want our staff using their intelligence and on-the-job experience to develop those programs. And so what we say in this section is they're welcome to use AI for creative ideas and different things like that, but in no way this should be the final product that comes to council. It shouldn't, our work needs to be done by us, not by a computer. And then one of the other things CIS recommended was that we provide a rule related to secret recordings. There used to be laws that protected one party from being secretly recorded. There's been some court cases that have kind of made that thought pattern, I guess, less stabilized. For lack of better words, some of the courts have said, yes, you can do these types of things. And in our workplace, we just don't want people acting like that. We want, if you want to record me, that's fine, but you have to tell me that you're going to do that. And so we just don't want people doing that. One of the things that we did add in here, I've done a couple of these handbooks for other cities, and a lot of the cities have what's called a standby fee for their public works staff. We have a whole set of criteria that's specific to police, and we've got a little bit of criteria that's specific to public works. But one of the things that we don't have in there is a standby fee. And what standby is a member of our staff has to be available if the SCADA system or, you know, the police or somebody makes a call to them and says, we need you to come in right away. We have a structure for paying them to come in, but what we don't do is compensate them for sitting at home, not going out on a date or, you know, going to dinner or whatever, going to the movies. They have to be around. And so we thought a $25 standby fee when they're having to wait for those calls is appropriate. Typically, Steve or Matt, our directors, would oftentimes take those calls, but I think it's important for everybody to have the benefit of that. And so Steve and Matt developed a policy. It's very specific. You're assigned a week standby fee, and you're going to carry a city phone, and you know you have to respond. You have to follow the certain template that we have in order to get your $25. And so we did go ahead and incorporate that. That is a benefit, and it wasn't part of our discussions earlier, but it's a very minimal benefit. We think it's something that we could put in there. I don't think we changed a lot with code of conduct. The only thing we did, we do have a we prohibit firearms at work. And it was just a generic statement. And the police department just said, except if you're carrying it in your official capacity, officers carry a firearm. And oftentimes they have their own personal duty weapons or weapons that they carry in addition to that. And they just wanted to make sure they weren't going to get in trouble. So we just added a little bit of language there. Other than that, the handbook is as presented. Other than those things that I described, most of the language is the same. The language has been it's been rewritten to be gender neutral. That was a recommendation by CIS and we're fine with it. Just because, we're all trying to mitigate risk. And so they just recommended that we do that. So instead of he, she, it's more general, the employee, basically. So if you have any questions other than that, I'm happy to answer those.
I have a question. Do we know what other cities are regulating with the use of AI tools?
With AI?
Are we the only ones?
No, that recommended language comes right from CIS. So I think most cities are following that. I'm not sure if some cities are allowing it or implementing it more as a work product than we are. There may be some cities that are doing that. Honestly, I just don't know. We've tested it at City Hall for
We tried it with like the Corn Festival. We were like, we can't come up with a good name for Music on Main. We ended up coming with Music on Main on our own, but we looked at some bad ideas first, so.
But we did that for creativity, but we've asked it to write us, like, give us a staff report on, development ordinance, related to da. And it'll write out some outlines, but the problem with it is it doesn't know the details. And we could not use it in its current form for any type of a work product. We just want to make sure we're telling our employees, if we give you an assignment, don't just have a chat box write it for you. We want to see your work.
I just ask because right now there's no federal regulations against AI. So I was just wondering where we're setting our criteria based on other cities.
Yeah, the criteria is the work probably wouldn't be acceptable. There'd probably be a higher level of errors. And that's one of the things that we found is it didn't know some of the terminology. And so it just wouldn't, it's good for ideas. Like I say, we did it with Corn Festival themes and it came up with some themes. None of them were ones that we would use, but it got us thinking about other themes. Ultimately, I think we ended up picking one from last year.
I think so.
Yeah. Was one of your choices last year that we thought, oh, that's still a good one.
I like the way it's worded. Part of it. It's not.
Yeah.
One other question real quick. So the on-call fee is $25 a day, right?
Yeah.
Not a week.
Yeah, and the city benefits are really across the board. We didn't do $25 is kind of the starting place. We didn't do an analysis and try to come up with something that was some industry mid-range. We just said, let's just implement it at the minimum. And then, we can look at that next time we do our salary review. That'll be one of the things that we'll look at and see where cities are with that benefit. But to some extent, we've just said to our director, you will come in. You will come in, but he has to have personal time too. So we want to be able to spread that out.
My last question is, aside from our legal consultation, how many, did we have staff involved in the changes in a handbook that's going to reflect their job?
Well, there's no changes in here.
The revisions that we did.
Yeah, well, all of the revisions are required by law. And so we did talk about all of these revisions at our all staff meetings. And then we did send the draft handbook out to each department head, which they were instructed to go through the changes with their staff and bring back comments. The standby fee was one of those comments that came back. And after we looked at that, we thought, yeah, that makes some sense. So let's go ahead and propose it. So yes, we did go through, we did talk to staff about it. We didn't just say, here's your new handbook.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the September 2024 update of the employee handbook as presented by staff and authorize the policies and benefits.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to 6D, city councilor applications. We have received 2 for the position that is open for appointment.
Yeah, and Mayor Council, so the appointment of a council member really falls within the purview of the council. There's really no designated process that you need to use or set time criteria. We did do a pretty lengthy outreach, and thank you all for the help. Because we ultimately did get 2 applications, and that was great. Other than the applications on their face, I don't have anything to add. There's certainly, we wouldn't make a recommendation from staff, and I haven't spoke to either of the applicants. You are free to follow any process that you would like. If you reviewed the applications and you're comfortable with an applicant, you can appoint tonight. I wasn't expecting that, but we will, if you did that, that would be fine. Or you could set an appointment up for the next council meeting. You could talk to each applicant individually. You could meet with them and talk to them to see how they, what's on their mind about serving on the council, or you could do an interview process. So it's really kind of this open slate for you to decide.
And I believe we have both applicants here tonight, right? Or just one?
Yep.
I guess my question for the council is this, they were in our packets. Did you guys have a chance to go over the applications at all? I did not until I got here. Sorry, guys. Did any of you guys reach out to the applicants? I have not.
Nope.
I've reached out to Phyllis.
Are you guys comfortable? Okay.
So just go ahead and introduce yourself and talk to us about why you want to be on city council.
My name's Phyllis Hernandez. I've lived in Aumsville for a year this time. 3 years ago, I lived here for 3 years. I've worked for the city of Salem and Public Works Engineering. And you guys are putting in a treatment plant that triggered my curiosity. And some of the things that Ron was talking about with contracting, the different rules and everything, I worked in the contracting rules part of Public Works. I awarded bids. I reviewed the bids. I paid payments to contractors. So I'm interested in the smaller part of a city instead of just a little part of a big part of the city. And I love Aumsville. It's a cute, a really nice community. I wish my children could have grown up here instead of in Salem. So I'm just interested in learning more about the city and how it works and being a part of how it works.
Thank you. We have Greg.
But my name is Greg Hudson. I live on Willamette Street. I've been in Aumsville about 8 years now. Have never been involved in city council. I was involved in Turner a little bit, hazard mitigation team. The CERT team was after the floods, why I got involved. I saw the mayor's post. You guys had an empty seat. You were looking for somebody. I appreciate what you guys all do. Put in the application. Actually picked up the application, sat on my desk for probably a month and a half. I'm self-employed. I own a small painting business. Not a lot of free time going into off season. So I figured, I'll fill it out, submit it. Ron reached out right away. He's like, well, have you been to any meetings? Why don't you come to a meeting? I was like, well, I haven't even been to a city council meeting. So starting with that, just see how the whole process works. Happy to be involved. I'm kind of a middle of the road guy. I don't ruffle a lot of feathers, more passive than aggressive. So this is the first step. Figured I'd come and check out the meeting and see how it works. She probably has more experience in what we're gonna go through with the wastewater thing. That's, that's on everybody's mind that lives in Aumsville, but I have no complaints about Aumsville. I love it here. It's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, don't worry about experience, either of you guys.
Yeah, no experience in this other than, like I said, the hazard mitigation. That was, our house flooded in 2012. Of course, you guys know about the big, the flood. We weren't in a floodplain, wasn't required by mortgage insurance to have flood insurance through our mortgage. So at that point, kind of got involved with, where did the problem go on? And it was maps, old maps, good old boy stuff from the 60s, and kind of got involved, and then was asked by David Sawyer, the city administrator, who's passed away now, but hey, why don't you join our team? Because we don't even have a emergency handbook in place, and they hadn't for years. So got involved in that and different stuff from train derailment to flooding to, that. And then we just decided to move to Aumsville because I was sick of worrying about that creek, and I like it here better. And it's been great. It's been really great living here. You guys do a great job. I've got free time. I could be involved. That's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you.
Sure.
Your business is located here in Aumsville?
It is. I'm a house painter. So, I try and stay from Salem this way. 80% of my work is out of Salem, but did the Aumsville gas station, did Sandy's office, probably 12 homes here in the last 2 years. Darren Drill, he's my neighbor, did his house, made him happy. So yeah, just a house painter, got about 4 employees. It's good. Sure. Thank you guys.
6 years ago, I stood up in front of council and said, if I can be on the PTA club, I can do this. So like,
Clearly a lot of experience required.
take their kids.
So not that I want to let any good breathing applicants walk out the door. We do have an opening on the planning commission. If one of our applicants are interested in that, it's available as well. So seems like we have 2 people that want to get involved. I don't want to twist anybody's arm tonight, but if you do end up appointing and somebody doesn't get appointed, there is an opportunity. A lot of you have moved up from, some of you have moved up from the planning commission. So it's always a good place to maybe get, more understanding about the ordinances and government. We do have a position open there as well.
And they do meet less frequently as well? They meet less frequently as well?
Yeah, the planning commission, they're scheduled to meet twice a month, but the reality is we might meet 3 times a year. It'll probably be more often this year because there is more interest in development, but even if it meant once a month, you guys meet twice a month, it's probably less of a commitment.
What do you guys want to do? You want to speak? Give you a chance to be fun.
Why is the appointment outside of like a voting thing, somebody drop out?
Yes, so we had a counselor step out midterm. So this city council is a 4-year term. Half the city council runs at one time. So it's like every 2 years, we're appointing a new city, electing new city councilors so that we're not having all new city councilors at one. Mayor is a 2-year term. Nico was 2 years into his 4-year term when he stepped down. So this position will fill out the remainder,
This year plus 2 years.
yeah, this year plus 2 years. So just a little over 2 years. And then if whoever gets appointed chooses to rerun again, at that point, they would have to run in the election.
I remember him knocking on my door.
Whether it be mayor or council.
It was nice, guys.
That's good.
Yeah, there was a few of us that went door to door.
We have an opportunity to have another discussion.
We can, yeah, we can set a goal to appoint next city council meeting, and that gives us an opportunity for us to reach out one-on-one and have conversations with them, if that's what you guys want to do. I will,
So Nico's position is 2 years.
so the rest of this year plus 2 years. Yeah.
Ends at the end of December 2026.
Next conversation or tonight, so.
Doug, you're wanting to meet one-on-one?
Yeah, I think we should at least have a chance to have a conversation.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Kate? So that's what we'll go ahead and do. We will reach out in the next couple weeks to have a chat with you guys, and then next city council we will appoint.
So that's September 23rd.
Second and fourth.
Second and fourth, yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, so moving, we are on to number 7. Should be in the city administrator report. Ron, go ahead with your report.
Had to change a date. Had my dates wrong. Oh, it's been a lot going on right now. So mayor, council, one of the things, I do have a written report that you guys received tonight. One of the things not in that report is FCS. We have them scheduled for the 23rd to present their rate analysis based on the funding that we have acquired for the wastewater treatment facility. And they're gonna come in person. You'll be able to ask questions. They have a model that they use, basically like our forecast model. And we've been doing our forecast model for a long time, and Josh understands it and he understands their model, but I don't. So they have a lot of assumptions in there. Although what I will tell you is based on the number of grants that we've received, if our project cost stays within the parameters that we think it's going to stay in, the cost to our community is greatly reduced from where we thought it would be. But I'll let you see that in the model. I think we should invite Senator Gerard and Representative Beal. They did help us acquire some additional funding, and I think it'd be a great conversation if they're available. We'll see if they're available, but I think it'd be great for them to be there just to look at where we think we are, which is, again, there is going to be an increase, but it's not going to be the scary scenario that we thought it would be. So that's really good. I heard you talking about floodplain. FEMA's come out with some new model rules about developing. As a matter of fact, they're requirements for the cities to adopt. And we'll give you a full presentation. We may end up scheduling a work session to talk about some of those things, including maybe more in depth about 1537, Senate Bill 1537, because there's been some changes since we last talked about that. Just because there's a lot to it. But basically FEMA is wanting cities to not allow any development in any of the floodplains. They've given some options, but the options that they give to develop in the floodplain,
Like 100-year floodplains? Like the 100-year floodplains?
I think it's the 100-year floodplain, yes. And so we'll go through that in detail with our planner. I'd like to schedule him to come in for a work session, but But it does change the way that we look at developing in the floodplain per their new federal guidelines.
How much
So,
area do we have in the city that's in that?
well, some cities are in a lot worse shape than we are, but there are quite a few areas in the city. Most of them, anything that would affect us residentially is already built. But depending on which of these rules we ended up adopting, it could impact some of those folks that are in. If you look at our city, all of this area down in here is floodplain. There's some up here along Michael Way, Beaver Creek is, and then we have a lot of wetlands, but FEMA's concerned about floodplain. So we'll talk about that. Move on to Corn Festival. I think we had a great year with Corn Festival. We've gotten feedback from lots of folks, and it's been extremely positive this year. And we've even heard vendors that were talking about Corn Festival to other people came back in and said, yeah, this vendor was telling me how fantastic it was. So we had a lot of great feedback. We did pretty good on sponsorship, although we didn't really work real hard at it this year, mainly because we were so busy doing other things, but we actually ended up having a couple of big sponsors come through, and we did pretty well on it. And overall, we actually made more money than we did last year. So I think it's going to be in the $21,000 range. We're still getting all of the final bills in. But right now we're, I think, around 24, 25, but we haven't paid for corn and a few other things. So we'll come back to you with a final report, but for all intents and purposes, it was a really, really good Corn Fest. We had a few less volunteers on Saturday. We had a lot of volunteers. We had over 70 volunteers on Friday for bagging. We probably had maybe 40 or 50 on Saturday. It was a few less. And so those of you who did volunteer, it's kind of you don't get a chance to even look up, right? It's just as soon as people start lining up, it's a constant flow.
I just want to give kudos to a couple of counselors who have not volunteered. And I was like, oh, I think they're just going to do it for a couple hours. But Scott and Doug, they went and they just never left once they got there.
Yeah.
Which was amazing because that means I didn't have to do it. So
So I'm gonna tell you guys right now, I walked into Lowe's, who there happens to be a community member that works there. And I went to check out, and just like, I saw your happy face on social media, and I was like, I was all for the kids, and it was all because of that person right there taking pictures. So thank you, Deanna, for all the awesome pictures that you took.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. For years, guys, I've done it, and I think Nico and Della helps with the parade, but like I said, I think the community is probably tired of seeing my face. There's 7 of us, or 6 of us. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we need about 20 more corn shuckers. So anybody that's looking for a volunteer job
Or like 5 more Celias.
next year, same time, same place. I will say we fit in a lot of vendors. We actually stopped accepting vendors for a while, and then Kirsty and I kind of revamped the map and found some more area that we could put vendors in. We opened up some new area that we hadn't used before. We had 117 vendor spots, and the most we've ever had before was like 80.
I love that it went out into the tennis court. That was really nice.
Yeah. And the organization this year was, honestly, it was much less stressful at City Hall than we have felt. So we're really dialing in our process. We're developing an events manual specific to the Corn Festival. So, future people can pick up where we left off and not have to go through that learning exercise. But as you guys saw, once that line starts to form, and everything that we do to tweak it. I know Doug mentioned to me last year, he helped butter. He's like, that butter is really messy. And so it got me thinking about letting people put their own butter on, which worked out good because we used to separate buttered versus non-buttered corn because some people want it non-buttered. And it worked out great. People could put whatever they wanted on it. They could put their seasoning on it. And
Feedback on that.
the funny thing is that butter is expensive and we used less than half of what we typically use by just that process.
This year was
Much better. The only thing we do to tweak it next year is we need a row of butter tables instead of just one or two. So.
I want to say there was a lot of positive feedback on, like, they would come grab the corners, like, can I get some that's unbuttered?
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, no, you get to butter as much as you want. And like, oh,
Yes,
thank
there you go.
goodness.
yeah, yeah,
There was a lot of positive feedback on that.
yeah.
There was positive feedback. I know that we have transitioned the Music on Main from being part of, like, I think we were making like $1,000 out of the beer garden. It wasn't a lot by the time it was said and done. And now it's like a kickoff event,
Mhm.
but there was a lot of positive feedback that came into my email and my messenger for my mayor messenger. So working with the fire department and having the car show, and
Car show was fantastic.
it was
Yeah.
good. I mean, we had a lot of positive things said
And-
about that kickoff event.
And that's a product of the events planning committee that we formed because that all came about from that committee and fire personnel at the committee talking about, here's the things we need to do for Corn Festival. And they're like, well, what about a car show? Could we do that? I'm like, do you guys want to lead it? Yeah, we'll lead it. And so, that's the nice thing about getting all the players, businesses and volunteers and organizational groups and staff. And it really I think it makes it much more organized. Honestly, I wasn't sure how the car show was going to come out. I was thinking, 10 or 12 cars. Honestly,
People
I
go
was,
to the park all day
I
long.
was, I was shocked how many cars were there
The only
and
thing
it was wonderful.
Maybe we can, when we have that feedback, the only thing that came back that I was like constructive was it would have been nice if the car show had prizes. And I was like, well, we got to talk to the fire department about that.
Yeah.
It was their car show.
And
They were-
we didn't think about that, but that was certainly something that's within our scope.
But they also said that they didn't know how many cars would come
Mhm.
or how many categories or anything. So now they have something to base it on and they do plan on doing that.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I did tell, there was like two people that came up to me that it was the first time, like this is our learning year. I don't know what.
Wow.
It was a suggested donation too. I think it was like a 20 or 25 suggested. Trophies would be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, yeah, it was a fundraiser, yeah, and so it goes,
Everything we do is a fundraiser. We're always trying to raise for the other groups.
I think it was a great addition. I mean, I'm not one for
Yeah.
just sitting there and listening to music, but to be able to kind of wander around through the cars and hear
Yeah.
the music, and I think it was great.
Yeah. I think it drew people in, honestly, for the music. That band, I have to tell you, I won't tell you the drama that we went through to get that band. The mayor and I, believe me, I've lost a lot of hair over the band. But that band actually turned out to be
They
a
did.
really, really good band.
I sent them a thank you email, I really did. Originally, guys, there were supposed to be two bands. Unfortunately, the opening act had some medical problems.
Yeah.
And it was like a month before our event, and I was like, I don't care to, and she said, this was my opening act, they're willing to do it. I was like, well, we'll just go with it. We'll just,
But they were quality. I thought they were great. Yeah,
We're good.
I thought they were
Yeah.
fantastic.
You're
All right, so we'll come back to you with a full accounting at either the next meeting or the October meeting. We'll have a distribution recommendation. I know we've had some feedback about that. We still think the way that we're doing it has a little subjectivity to it, but it really needs to be subjective because not every role that people volunteer for has the same weight to it. And so we'll have a recommendation. We'll try to have a little bit more meat on the bone for the recommendation. The new reservoir, if you haven't driven by there and looked over, it's getting pretty close.
I saw that video on YouTube that we had.
Yeah.
I actually just uploaded an
Is it
updated one
updated now?
today.
Is it updated? Yeah, because I reposted it and they were like, I didn't even know that was going on. So
Yeah,
if there's an updated one, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
we've been by
It
there.
looks crazy.
I will say, it is a quality project. It cost a lot more than we expected, but it is a good quality build that we're getting there. And I do think our engineer, even though I give them crap because, they're always throwing a curveball at me or something like that. I do think they did a really good job, engineering, the tank. So I'm pretty happy about that. I'm not going to go through everything. LOC.
Ron, where did we land on the painting or the whatever on
Yeah,
it?
the
Is there
design.
gonna be something on it?
Yes,
Still?
yes, it's part of our bid packet. I got some renditions. What we're gonna end up doing because of the kind of tank that we picked. It's a bolted steel tank. Our other tank is a welded tank. And with the bolted steel, it's glass infused on the outside. And the manufacturer doesn't want it to be painted because of the warranty of how the construction is done. But they're gonna do a wrap. So we haven't gotten the final tally for the cost of the wrap. I got some mock artwork today. And we're gonna probably bring those back at our next council meeting if we can get, I've asked them to make a few changes. For examples for the council, and then we'll bring them back and we'll let you look at them and talk about cost. But cost of everything went up, so our expectation is gonna cost a little bit more. But I do think it's worth doing. I think continuing that vision element of art and just not having a piece of steel, but having something that the community can enjoy is important, so.
We're gonna paint Billy Budlow, Charlene on it.
It's gonna be a forest, a really nice soothing forest.
We never
Um,
picked the forest design.
No, I was on medical leave when you guys picked the forest, so that doesn't count.
There's a
Well, that
reason
was-
why we did it then.
That was handy.
Well, don't go on medical leave next time. Okay,
The LLC article, Scott had asked about if that was a very informational article. If you guys had a chance to look at it. Seeing if we can maybe put that in a community letter.
the LOC article, yeah,
Yeah, if we could, that'd be awesome.
yeah, no,
Good read.
I thought it turned out really well. Kirsty and I did the interview for that. We actually ended up editing the article.
Mhm.
We probably could have wrote a 20-page paper on our transition to where we were. So, but we ended up paring it down. But we're happy that, the state agencies have recommended, the city to come and speak at the state conferences to show other cities by example how we were able to be successful. The League of Oregon Cities now asked us to do this feature article so other cities could kind of benefit from that. And I just think that shows that at least other cities and agencies around the state that are in the know of infrastructure feel pretty good. I will tell you that when we did the infrastructure summit, and this is where you get a lot of cities, but you get all the state agencies and the funding organizations, which is typically infrastructure is a pretty dry topic. We were the talk of the conference, so.
Honestly, yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Anyway, I'll continue on. So our wastewater project continues. You approved the amendment to the contract. I'll be honest with you, council, this project is a beast, and there's a lot of complicated moving parts to it. And there's a lot of new ground that's being broken. And I don't want you to overly think about it. I just want to let you know that we're dealing with some federal political agendas / state reconciliation type thing. So one of the big hurdles we're dealing with right now is the BABA requirements. And that's Buy America And basically, when you're dealing with, let's say this wastewater facility, and you've got these giant switches and pumps that are part of the SBR, every conductor, every element, every switch under the federal guidelines needs to be made in America. Well, there's some things, even though that is going to be built in America, there may be some conductors that aren't just manufactured here, right? I mean, 58% of the conductors in the world are manufactured in Taiwan. So the federal government has one view of how this should occur. The state has their own set of views, and we're kind of caught trying to figure out, okay, how do we make everybody happy and make it all work? So that's delaying our project a little bit. And we've got a meeting on the 19th scheduled with all of our funding stakeholders. We're going to talk through what does some of this mean, and how do we navigate through it. But remember when we talked about we were kind of in a race and we're trying to be faster than everybody else? Well, this is slowing us down a little bit.
We're not winning. We're not winning the race. Is that what you're saying?
We are the first project in the state of Oregon under this new criteria. We may be the first in the United States. We don't know. So we're kind of the guinea pig. And it's causing some issues. And even the state agencies don't know how to meet some of the federal standards on their end, because they do things differently. And I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're working on it, but it's a challenge. Every day seems to be a new challenge with it.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's heartburn is what it is.
We have been warned about this in some of our meetings.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a surprise, but it's more of a challenge than what they told.
And then anytime you get federal politics into something, it's just a nightmare. State or our city financials, I think you all got a copy of the financials right there. So that is our year-end financials. We haven't actually closed the books, but we've done everything prior to closing the books. And as you see, we're hitting our forecast marks pretty good on the revenue. If you look at most of our revenue lines, we're right on the target. And if you look at our expenditure lines, for the most part, all of our funds are a little under, or a lot under in some cases, because one of our fiscal policies is that we don't spend money unnecessarily just because it's budgeted. So typically what you tend to see is funds that are only spending 60, 50, 70% of what they're budgeted. And that's just part of our fiscal responsibility that we do here. So we're closing the year out really well. There probably will be some additional carryover that we didn't budget. And so, maybe next year when we budget, there may be even some additional projects that we can fit in from some of the money we didn't end up spending. So we're looking really good. Right now, we're currently undergoing our yearly audit. They were supposed to be in the office today, but then they called in sick. So hopefully they'll come in tomorrow and they won't get everybody else sick. But we'll be doing that for a few days. And it's the audit is usually about a 3-week process. They come into the office for 3 or 4 days, and then we're feeding them information going through that process. So we're in the middle of that. And then I wanted to ask council, we were in touch by a company with a platform called TextMyGov. There's a number of platforms out there. GoGov, I think, is one. TextMyGov, it's a communication platform where residents can basically sign up. They sign up to it. The company will front load numbers from research data, but oftentimes they're landlines, and so a lot of them are not usable, but you can get some cell phone data. But for the most part, residents would sign up to it, and then we could push out updates like, come to the council meeting and hear about the wastewater rate proposal or something like that. A few of the surrounding cities have used it. It's $3,800 a year. You have to make a 3-year commitment. They wanted $2,000 to basically populate it for our city, and we negotiated that out. So it's just the standard platform rate. We're not under a time constraint. We don't have to do it, but I know communication has been a big part of our success, and it's just another tool. And I wanted to see if that was something you were interested in us exploring. We could use it for 3 years. Maybe it's a great tool. If it's not, we don't have to continue it.
I've seen those advertisements come into my email, and yeah, I'm interested in it.
Heard to try it out.
These are people that opt in to do it, right? So. And they can
Yeah,
opt
it's
out.
about an $11,000 commitment over 3 years, but honestly, for a communication tool, we've got money in our fund, so we could easily try it out if you wanted to.
But free to the community members?
It's free. They don't have to pay anything.
It would be like,
They
there's
just sign
always
up.
some sort of like standard data, applies
Yeah.
with your cellular company. It's like when you opt in to get text messages from Dutch Brothers.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it. I think it's great.
I don't see why it wouldn't hurt to try it out at least, if we don't get a lot of feedback or communication. Maybe get rid of
Yeah.
it, but try it out, maybe.
yeah, if you can set it up, we'd really like to set it up to push information out. Because we have mechanisms to receive information, and we want to condense that channel because it just creates more work. We want them to be in a program channel. But I'd like to have it more as a pushing tool. But if we can get folks to sign up on it, I could just think of a lot of scenarios where we can, if we can get enough people signed up to it. It's kind of like going door to door. Not everybody sees the sign, not everybody reads the newsletter, but you knock on their door and they answer. They're kind of, they're a captive audience, and I think the text messaging is somewhat in between.
It doesn't matter how many people, it's not based on how many people are signed up. It's just a flat rate for.
It's based on a per
Everybody.
capita.
Our
Yeah.
population though, not how many people are signed up on it, but how many
Okay.
people live in Aumsville.
Yeah. It's a flat $3,800 a year for 3 years.
Okay.
You like that? We'll explore it. We'll probably,
There's a couple other options we'll look into before we solidify probably.
Yeah.
But like our website offers one also, but this one I think is probably the,
we can push
better
notices through the website if people sign up, but it's email. And, not everybody signs up for the email. So we'll push like newsletters through email. There's people that don't live in the city that want the newsletter. And if they sign up, they can get it free. They don't have to go to the website, things like that. So
But you could actually push the newsletter through this.
yeah.
I
you
don't
can-
know-
You can send links.
I think you could push a link
Yeah.
through, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. New, yeah. Now updated.
Their city's using it, so they've been using it for about a month. And seems to work pretty well. How many do you have signed up on yours? So I've got a little 400 people over a month.
Seems that
Okay,
messaging.
well, we'll come
would-
back. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Messaging would be more timely too, if we could do it this way. When people are complaining that they didn't
Yeah.
hear about it or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
Right.
push it all out to everybody
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah. So there's a system that we used for under our emergency services, and they have something like that. And I would like to explore that as a tool for future use, but basically it's like a reverse 911. Now, we couldn't use it for just standard city stuff. It has to be through the emergency channel. But, storm events, we could basically draw a map around an area. If you had a lockdown on the school or a suspicious person, you could draw a circle around that area and you could say, school's in lockdown, there's a suspicious person in this area, and you could send a reverse text to everybody in that little circle. Those are tools for emergency use, which we would like to look at some point in the future too. But this is really just a communication tool about policies and things that are going on in the city to try to keep the community informed. you really have to look for ways to push information out to our community because people are busy. And even though we have a lot of platforms, as you guys know, because you helped develop them, and our communication plan has been used as an example for a lot of other cities, you still always have to be trying to add the next channel, the next tool to reach more and more people, because that just makes it much easier if our population is in the know.
We have a staff person or enough staff to take that on?
Well, that's why we want to just push information out, because if we were receiving information, it could overload us. I will tell you that we are 5 staff members beyond capacity, but we're still, we're still doing everything that we need to do, but it's always the way. That's always the way it is. Citywide, we could certainly use a lot more people, but that's just not the reality.
With what we'd use it for, though, it'd be an extra 3 minutes probably for each activity. So like uploading the newsletter, there's, it's just the events and stuff, just an extra little step that you'd add on to it. So I don't think it would add a whole lot of work to our workload.
We're doing all the necessary work, and then we're trying to pick away at the nice to have stuff. So, that's working. All right. I think that's it. The department report is in your packet. And then the Public Works report, I think we touched on a lot of that. The 6th Street project is underway. If you've driven by there, it's in construction mode right now. We're really working closely with the neighbors to make sure that everybody's happy with the improvement. And there's some unusual approaches that we've had to reconfigure, but we've been doing that. I think everything else is going well. As you know, we still need to deal with water shortages here in the city. We pumped a lot more water during the summer months per day than our capacity. And because we had the storage capacity, we were able to keep up with it. But that's an issue. Once we get the reservoir done and we close that project out, we'll be back talking about the next issue to try to get another well or alternatives. So we'll get a witcher out there.
I'll do it.
Happy to answer any questions if you have any about just general stuff in the city.
I don't have any questions right now.
Okay.
Moving on to good of the order. Does anyone have, mayor and councilor reports? I will be speaking tomorrow at Cascade High School with class is this contemporary issues in the morning. Senior class. And let's see what else. We have the LOC conference. I think all the ones of us that are going are already registered in October. That's all that I have. Anything for good of the order?
I don't have anything to report from MWAC or SCATS. It was just a lot of month at meetings, so. Going to be gearing up for new projects and the steps from 25 through 8. Getting a lot of information on new projects to wade through.
There are no correspondence in the packet and we have no executive session. So we can go ahead and adjourn our very long meeting tonight at 8:44 p.m.